So now let's talk about Creo 9. All right, so Creo 9, we're using, as you can see, the Triumph motorbike that Paul was talking about earlier. And again, we've got these high-level themes. Okay, so 5 themes here. 4 of them being what you saw previously with earlier releases. So we've got usability and productivity, new one design for ergonomics, model-based definition detailing, generative design and simulation, and added abstract manufacturing. So let's talk about usability and productivity first. So lots of different enhancements across lots of different areas here inside Creo. Okay, so the first one we'll talk about is just some general UI, user experience stuff. First one here, the ability to rotate the model using the keyboard arrows. Okay, so you can do it using your mouse. Obviously, you can use a 3D connection device like I've got here, but you can hold down the Shift key and use the arrows on your keyboard to rotate the model in default 15-degree increments. You can change that to different intervals if you like. You can see there in the options. So you can use your keyboard if you want to rotate the model around, get that precise control. Okay. Personalized zoom to selected. So this is a nice one. So this has been around since Creo 1 from memory. You could pick on a surface or a bit of geometry component, whatever, and say, zoom to selected. And that would zoom to make that fit the screen. But maybe that's, you don't quite want to do that. Maybe it's too much or too little. So through this configuration option, you can set that level of zoom. So you might say, actually, when I pick that, I don't want to completely fill the screen. I want to be backed off a little bit so I can see that item, that surface, whatever it is, plus a little bit more around it. Okay, so you can set that zoom level to be a little bit lower. We can go a little bit further than that, greater than 1. Okay. So as you can see here in the slide, that option has also been backported into later versions of Creo 7 and 8 as well. Okay, so if you're still running those, if you're on those newer builds or higher, then you'll have that option available too. Okay, the select from parents. Okay, so this was in the little pop-up menu on the top row on the far right-hand side. We could pick on a bit of geometry, and then you could see all of the parents all the way up the chain. Okay, so that's now being changed. It's now called select related. So the idea of that is it doesn't just show you the parents, it also shows you the children as well. Okay, so that can be there from the pop-up. It can also be shown in the model tree. We'll have a look at that in the demo. It's much easier to understand there. That's a very nice new tool now where I can just quickly pick on a feature and see at a glance all of its parents and all of its children. Other little bits and pieces, math properties now, you can report them in CSV or XML format. So rather than just the old DAT text file format that Creo used, that's still there, but CSV might be more useful if you want to do something externally with them, dump it out in Excel and do a bit more analysis, whatever it might be. In terms of core modeling, okay. So this one's my favorite, okay, is the new auto scale of the first sketch. Okay, so the idea is that I create a sketch. It's not the right scale, right? So it should be, let's say it should be 150, but it's decided the dimension is 15. So I change that dimension 150, and that dimension scales, and all the rest of the sketch doesn't. So the sketch goes all a weird shape or things like that. So now when you modify that first dimension, it'll scale the entire sketch with it. Okay, I'll show this in the demonstration. It's much easier to understand. It's controlled through a config option. You can turn it off if you really want to, but I don't know why you'd want to based on what you see. Okay, other things inside Sketcher. So the project offset tools, they've been updated. So there's a little bit of old UI and even a little bit of menu manager used to pop up inside that. So it's now using a new UI for that. You've got your chain selection options available now, so it's consistent with the rest of the UI in terms of how it appears and what you can see, better reference handling and things like that as well. Some new inspection tools down the bottom here. So a couple of new ones in there around to highlight T-junctions and intersections now. So where things touch like that or like that, you can show that as well. Okay. The Geodesic Curve. So this was introduced back in Creo 8. So there's been an update to that for Creo 9. So previously it was just between 2 points on the surface. So now we can define that by a point and an angular direction to define that. A big one in Creo 9 is the divide surface command. Okay, so this replaces the old surface region. So you have a surface here, and you might want to break that up. Okay, so that was available in Creo Simulate as a certain surface region. So you had to have Creo Simulate to do it, and you could go in and break it up by a sketch or something like that. The idea of that being, you might want to apply a load. You might want to apply a load to the surface, but it's only going to be applied in a particular area of that surface, not across the entire surface. Maybe someone pushing down with something. Okay, so now that's core functionality, the ability to divide those surfaces up. Okay, so we can divide them. We can also do a unified and join them back together again. And we can join other bits and pieces together. Okay, so lots of different use cases for that. The obvious one being simulation. This is where it's always been inside Creo. So as I showed there, I might have this this bracket here, but there's a load being applied, not to that entire surface, but just to an area of that surface. Okay, so I can define that. So now I don't need simulate to do that. I can do that in the design phase of that, and that surface will be there for applying the load to it. Okay, MBD, where I might want to pick references for where I'm going, areas of what I want to do, stamping or notes, whatever it might be. Okay, so again, I can break up those surfaces to find these little areas to use. Aesthetics is a big one, right? So I might want to model something like this, right? And I've got these different colored areas. You can see there's multiple different areas across this surface here, this conical surface with numbers and everything else. So I could do that. Absolutely, I could do that in Creo. I'd be doing a lot of, copying, trimming, things like that, right? So now I can use the divide surface to achieve that same result much quicker with far less features. Works across other modules, like sheet metal. Okay, so I can divide surfaces. I can do that sort of stuff. Maybe I want to indicate, like in this example, I'm going to plate something. It supports across the bend and unbend and flat pattern as well, so it moves with those surfaces as they move. And just other general examples, late changes, shelling things out. You can use flexible modeling, which I'll show in the example. Engravings is another example. It's really helpful. Again, achieve things a lot faster than using some of the older techniques that you would have had to use in earlier builds of Creo. Pattern enhancements. Okay, so this is an enhancement to the geometry pattern. Okay, so the geometry pattern was introduced way back in Wildfire days. So the idea of a geometry pattern is, imagine that you've got a screw boss, right, inside a plastic part. So you want to create a pattern of those. So that screw boss could be made up of a number of features. There'd be an extrude, there's probably some chamfers, some holes, there'll be some rib features, some draft, maybe some rounds in there. So that screw boss will be made up of a number of features, right? And you can absolutely just go and group them together and pattern them as a solid, and that will pattern, right? But if there's a lot of them, that pattern can take a while to generate, because as it generates each solid feature in each group instance, so it's the first extrude, then the chamfer, then the hole, and that can take a while as it calculates the intersection with all the solids as it goes, right? And if you've got a lot of them, that can take quite a while to run. So the idea of the geometry pattern was that rather than patterning all of the solid features, I could pick the geometry, so the surfaces of that, and just pattern those surfaces and then solidify that. And that's much faster to regenerate than doing solids for every feature. So that was introduced, as I said, all the way back inside Wildfire days. So it can be a much faster way to pattern complex geometry. Okay, but again, even though that's quicker than doing with solids, if you've got lots of them, it could still take a while, right? And so if I had loads of them that are regenerating across like the same surface, so imagine it's a bit hard to see, I've got a whole bunch of little bosses here, and they're all sitting on the same surface, it would treat them as a general pattern, right? The whole general bearing identical pattern. So now there's this new identical attachments. If they're all going to be the same attachment to the same surface, I can do it that way, and that will be way faster. So in this benchmark example here, with a geometry pattern, that was using the old method, was 48 seconds to regenerate that, about 2 seconds to regenerate with the new option in Creo 9. Okay, now that 48 seconds is still way faster than what I've been doing with solids, but you can see there's a dramatic improvement there in performance. And this one actually came from the ideas side. Right? This was a customer idea that people voted on and said, yep, we want to do a lot of this. Obviously, a lot of people were doing that. So PDC built it in, right? So one of the things there I encourage everyone to do is, make sure you get on the community sites, make sure that you keep an eye on like ideas there, you can vote for them. I know that we've created some for customers that have logged support calls with us. We've had customers create them. So absolutely get in there and vote for those ideas, because PDC does look at those and they incorporate them into the software. Okay. Another one was flexibility with patterns. Okay. So if you had patterned a hole, right? If you wanted to change that hole from, let's say, a simple hole to a standard hole with all your countersinks and counterballs and threads, you couldn't do that if you're being patterned, right? So you had to delete the pattern, change the hole, then redo the pattern again. So now I can change the hole even if it's being patterned, or pattern instances will update to change that type. So more flexibility there. Again, while we're talking about holes, a bunch of options there. So new standard clearance holes, some more options around the default clearance for that. So you can set that in Config Pro. Again, that's been backported into Creo 8. Update control for your standard hole notes. So basically, reduce the number of changes you need to make when you work with those things. And also assembly holes now regenerate faster, better in terms of working out the boundary box size and what's going to interfere with or overlap with in terms of the geometry. Enhanced children handling dialog. Okay, so basically, when you pick on a feature and you go to suppress or delete it, there's a bunch of clicks to deal with all of the children for that. So they've simplified that process, making it easy to get in and see what you're dealing with in less clicks. The model tree. Okay, so I said before there was a bunch of changes in Creo 8 with the new design tree. Based on feedback, that's been further expanded on and enhanced in Creo 9. And I'll show this in the demonstration. There's a lot of things inside there. At a higher level, some of the things that are there, general stuff, toolbar in the tree now. So more icons and things for working with stuff. So it means less clicking into menus to access certain bits of functionality. Things like the model tree filter now been updated to show, it's down here with icons for everything like that. Saving the model tree settings is now per mode. Okay, so if you have your certain settings set up in assembly mode versus part mode versus sheet metal mode, it'll remember those different modes and switch for that automatically. Okay, the design tree that was introduced back inside Creo has been enhanced to add more capabilities inside there. Things around searching to find stuff, visibility controls, and how they work. As I said, based off feedback from the user after it was introduced in Creo 8. The design tree, other bits and pieces there. So I said the design tree is a way to help you organize your model that's kind of separate from the model tree, which is really showing you the order of feature creation. So different things around naming, working with custom groups inside that and naming of those, using drag and drop into those different custom groups for features and ordering of those and things like that as well. Okay. So while we're talking about groups, okay, so features inside custom groups, so you can drag them in and out, insert into groups. So there's some options there you can see in the menu picks to move them in and out of custom groups and working with those as well. And some more stuff, okay, so the quilt body evolution tree. So this was that snapshot thing that I was talking about that was introduced back in Creo 8. So that's been enhanced further inside Creo 9. That works with solids as well, so you can see that. It automatically shows that as well. It's a really nice feature. It's worth noting that the model needs to be fully regenerated in Creo 9 for that snapshot preview to work on everything. So that basically means if you open up a Creo 8 model, you need to go into the model player, go back to the start, tick the regen button, and hit go to the end, and now it's fully regenerated in Creo 9, and it will show all of that. Okay, obviously new models built in Creo 9, they'll be working like that straight off the bat. Some other options, just in the general model tree, there's a new insert before option. with the little icon showing you sticking in before the feature you picked, or the insert here, which goes after, has its own little icon. Also an option to say insert something into a quilt or insert it into a body when you're working with features as well. Okay. We'll have a look at these and we'll get into the demonstration. Freestyle Design. Okay, so this is the NURBS-based subdivisional surface modeling tool. It was introduced back in Creo 1. So the idea is I start off with a blob. It could be a 3D blob, or it could be a flat surface shape. And then I have a control mesh, and I can push and pull and extend and twist and do things to that mesh to end up with the shape that I want. So it's a freeform tool. We can constrain that to geometry. That was introduced back in Creo 3, I think, from memory. But great for, great as a conceptual design tool. We've got customers who are building, concept designs in that and taking those surfaces through into production tooling, right? So it's still a manufacturable surface. So some of the enhancements for that in Creo 9, there's a brush tool that was introduced. This came from the old Pro Paint package that PDC had many, many years ago. Some of you might remember that. Might have played around with that. So when I'm working with the mesh, I can subdivide that mesh to get really fine mesh control. But then, I have to pick on individual points or lines of that mesh to work with that. So I've now got these brush tools that I can create a brush. You can see the icon there on the screen, pick a size and then intensity and softness. I've got various commands here. I can drag that brush along more freeform to manipulate all that mesh that I run the brush over. Okay. The other one, mirroring shapes in Freestyle. Okay, so I can now mirror complete shapes by a plane. So previously, I could build half of it and have it mirrored automatically on the other half. If I had something that was completely outside, I couldn't do that. I've just disconnected. You can see I've got my tap versus the faucet here. So now I can mirror those as well and keep that dependency going. So I only need to model one side and it'll automatically do the other side for me. ISDX, so everything I've shown up to date has been like core functionality that you just any license to Creo would have that. ISDX is obviously the module. So if you've got ISDX, I know we've got a few people joining us today who are using ISDX. Pardon me. So this is your more traditional, curves and surfaces, sweeping, blending, lofting between those curves, freeform curves. So a bunch of updates for that in Creo 9. This is a new draft tangent connection for a curve on surface curve. So inside ISDX, we can actually draw spline curves that are on a surface. So they start off on the surface, not something that you project on. So there's now an option for draft tangent for that, getting those better boundary conditions you might need for parting lines and the like. You can generate isoline curves from surfaces. So there's a few options in terms of giving you a better control over that when you're building those isoline curves on the surfaces and how they move and follow. When you're working with these splines, obviously the control points and everything is very important for working with those splines. So some changes or some improved modifications when you're working with these control points in terms of either curvature or acceleration and controlling and constraining that and how you move that. The style curves tool, okay, so simplify them. So you might, go along clicking and you might create loads and loads of points because you're following a sketch, you're following some artwork or something, so you want to get really close to that. So you can simplify that to reduce the number of points. So that reduces, little weird inflections you might get and gives you a better result or something that's a bit smoother, okay. There's a smooth option as well. So if you have, again, done all that, but your head isn't quite steady, so there's a bit of, like you can see, a little bit waving like that, we can smooth that out to give us a better result as well, okay? And also now the support for periodic loft surfaces. So you can create lofted surfaces inside ISDX where you pick 3 or more curve chains and loft a surface along that. So we can make that periodic now to close that off. And then that supports GG curvature continuity of the closure points as well across that. Okay, so that's some of the stuff inside ISDX. Okay, back to graphics and Render Studio. So again, if you're on, this is core functionality. If you're on the subscription packaging, the new subscription packaging, this includes Render Studio. So again, it's been updated with Creo 9 to use the Keyshot 10 rendering engine. Okay, so I said before in Creo 9 it used Keyshot 9.3, which introduced GPU support, which enabled certain functionality like the denoise feature. Keyshot 10, that denoise feature you can run even if you don't have a compatible card, so it can use on CPU as well. If you've got a compatible GPU, it'll use it. If you don't, you can still access that functionality. Okay, so just worth noting on that. What I'm saying here is supported RTX, NVIDIA RTX graphics cards. We often get customers asking us about new hardware. We always recommend NVIDIA RTX cards, basically to ensure that no matter what you do, you'll have what bits of Creo you're using, you'll have supported hardware for that. Okay. On the graphics side of things, updated HDRI images, so high dynamic range images that are used for providing both the background and also the lighting for a rendered scene. So some updates to that in terms of how they appear, work with default gamma values and the like. In assembly mode, okay, circular reference reports. Well, I'm sure you guys don't have circular references in your assemblies, but that's basically easy to get you now if you need to troubleshoot them. Exploded view offset lines, so now you can actually add them into a group as well, because that was one of the problems. You create your assembly, and then you start doing all your explodes, and you get like potentially loads and loads of offset lines that expanded out your model tree. So now you can chuck them into a group, you can collapse the model tree down, make it nicer, a lot cleaner to look at. Replacing components in an assembly, so you can actually replace a component with an assembly that contains that same component. So put it in a subassembly that has that and automatically pull all the references across. We can also replace a component with a copy. Okay, so I could say I want to create a copy of this part and do that at the same time to replace it. For those of you using Windchill, obviously you've been able to do that in Windchill since forever. Okay, but if you're not using Windchill, you can do that now inside Creo. Another nice one, retrieve a missing component. So again, if you've got Windchill, you rename it, Windchill takes care of all of that. But if you're using directory data management, somebody goes and opens up a model, they rename it in session and in disk, and they didn't know that your assembly referenced that model, right? So you open your assembly up and it fails, you can't find that part. So you can always go and retrieve that part, but Creo would always be looking for the original name. It would force you to use the original name, so you had to rename it back or whatever. So now I can pick anything, right? I can pick any named file. I'll get a warning that, it doesn't know if it's the original model or not, right? So, just be careful. But if it does match, then it will automatically move all the references across and off you go, okay? So it's a nice new tool there if you're dealing with problems with models being renamed. Component ID in the session, component session ID in the model tree. So, you can show that now as a column in the model tree. So if you're working with things like assembly relations and stuff like that, it's very easy to see that now. You don't have to go clicking into the details of the objects. And embedded components that were introduced back in Creo 8. So some back-end stuff on that to make them work much faster, okay? All right, I should mention actually as well that embedded components weren't on by default in Creo 8. You had to turn them on with a config, but in Creo 9, they're now available by default. So that config option has been set to yes as the default option, okay? So that's some of the productivity stuff, right? Lots of stuff there.